Amara Hawthorne stood in the vast dining room of the grand mansion she called home, staring at the opulent table she had set with painstaking care. Flickering candlelight illuminated the crystal glasses and fine china, and a bouquet of red roses adorned the centerpiece. It was their third wedding anniversary, a day she had hoped would rekindle the love she once thought unbreakable. The clock ticked mercilessly, each second eating away at her fragile hope. Hours passed, and Damien Hawthorne, her husband, was nowhere to be found. Her heart clenched as memories of their past played in her mind. The day they met, the laughter they once shared, and the promises they made beneath the stars. At last, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the silence. Damien entered, his sharp suit still impeccable after a long day. In his hand was a briefcase, not the bouquet of flowers Amara had foolishly envisioned. "Damien," she called softly, her voice a mixture of desperation and longing. He barely glanced at her as he moved toward his study. "Not now, Amara. I had a long day." She followed him, determination replacing her hesitation. "Do you even know what today is?" He paused, his brow furrowing briefly before he sighed. "Amara, I don't have time for this. Dates like these are trivial." The word trivial echoed in her mind like a cruel refrain. She felt her chest tighten, the weight of years of neglect crashing down on her. That single word encapsulated their marriage, a once vivid dream now reduced to a gray existence. That night, as Damien buried himself in his work, Amara sat on their bed, staring at the suitcase she had pulled out from the closet. She packed her belongings with trembling hands, tears falling silently onto her clothes. She left a letter on the nightstand, her heart breaking as she wrote her final words to him. When she slipped out of the house, the night air felt heavy, yet liberating. She looked back at the mansion one last time before walking away, determined to find herself again, even if it meant leaving everything behind. Amara arrived in a small, picturesque town hours away from the city. It was the antithesis of the world she had left behind. Quaint streets lined with family-owned shops, friendly faces greeting one another, and a calm pace of life that immediately soothed her frayed nerves. She rented a modest apartment above a bakery, where the comforting scent of freshly baked bread greeted her each morning. The simplicity of her new life was a stark contrast to the luxury she had known, but for the first time in years, Amara felt a sense of peace. Determined to rebuild her life, she took a job at the local library. The quiet space, filled with the scent of old books and the sound of turning pages, became her sanctuary. She spent her days organizing shelves, helping visitors, and losing herself in the stories that surrounded her. The anonymity of the town allowed her to breathe again. One afternoon, while reshelving books, a kind voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, miss. Do you know where I can find books on art history?" Amara turned to see Carlo, a schoolteacher with warm brown eyes and an easy smile. His presence was like a ray of sunlight in the quiet library. "Art history is in the next aisle," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "Thanks," Carlo said, his smile lingering. "You seem like someone who appreciates art." Amara blinked in surprise. It had been years since anyone had associated her with art, something she had abandoned during her marriage. Carlo's words stirred something within her, a flicker of the passion she thought she had lost. As the weeks passed, Carlo became a regular visitor at the library. Their conversations started with casual exchanges about books, but gradually grew more personal. Carlo's genuine curiosity about her life and his infectious enthusiasm began to thaw the walls Amara had built around herself. Meanwhile, back in the city, Damien returned home to an empty house. At first, he dismissed Amara's absence as a passing whim, certain she would return. But as days turned into weeks, her silence became deafening. The once orderly mansion now felt cold and lifeless without her presence. Damien's confidence wavered as he came across the letter Amara had left. Her words were a painful reminder of his indifference, and for the first time, he questioned the choices that had led them to this point. A gnawing sense of loss began to take root in his heart. As Amara adjusted to her new life, she found herself drawn back to painting. One evening, she set up an easel by her apartment window, the town's soft lights serving as her inspiration. Her first brushstroke in years felt like a long-lost friend returning. Slowly, she began to pour her emotions onto the canvas: pain, hope, and a yearning for freedom. Her paintings soon caught the attention of the cafe owner below her apartment. He offered to display one of her pieces in the cafe, and she hesitantly agreed. The painting, a stormy seascape with a lone figure staring into the waves, quickly became a conversation starter among patrons. Carlo, noticing the artwork during one of his visits to the cafe, immediately recognized the depth of emotion it conveyed. When he learned it was Amara's work, he was both surprised and impressed. "Your painting," Carlo said one afternoon at the library, his eyes filled with admiration. "It's incredible. You have a gift." Amara blushed, and used to receiving such heartfelt praise. "Thank you," she said softly, her fingers nervously brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Carlo's unwavering belief in her talent gave Amara the courage to embrace her passion again. Their budding friendship became a source of light in her life, reminding her of the person she used to be, a woman unafraid to dream. Meanwhile, Damien's search for Amara intensified. He hired a private investigator, driven by a mixture of guilt and an unfamiliar sense of longing. As he sorted through her belongings one evening, he came across an unfinished painting she had hidden away, a portrait of a woman in the rain, her expression a haunting blend of sorrow and resilience. The painting spoke volumes, forcing Damien to confront the pain he had caused. It was the first step in his journey of self-reflection, though he wasn't sure if redemption was even possible. Amara's life began to settle into a comforting rhythm. The small town's simplicity was a balm for her wounded spirit, and each day brought her closer to rediscovering herself. Her work at the library filled her mornings, while her evenings were dedicated to painting. Slowly, she began to feel like the woman she had been before her marriage, a woman with dreams, creativity, and a zest for life. Carlo continued to visit the library, their encounters growing more frequent and their conversations deeper. He had a warmth about him, a patience that Amara found both comforting and disarming. Over cups of coffee and discussions about books, they began to share fragments of their lives. "You have a unique way of seeing the world," Carlo remarked one afternoon, after Amara mentioned her love for painting landscapes. "Your perspective, it's rare." Amara smiled, the compliment warming her. "Painting is my escape. It's where I pour everything I can't put into words." He studied her for a moment, his gaze filled with curiosity. "I'd love to see your work sometime." Amara hesitated, and used to such direct interest in her passion. But Carlo's sincerity made it difficult to refuse. "Maybe someday," she replied softly. Meanwhile, her painting in the cafe had begun to draw attention. A local art collector stopped by one day, intrigued by the emotional depth of the piece. The cafe owner proudly mentioned Amara as the artist, prompting the collector to seek her out. "Your work is extraordinary," the collector said when he found her at the library. "I'd love to feature it in an upcoming exhibition." Amara was stunned. She had never considered her work worthy of such recognition. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," she admitted, her voice tinged with self-doubt. "You have a gift," Carlo chimed in, having overheard the conversation. "Don't hide it from the world." His encouragement, coupled with the collector's enthusiasm, planted a seed of possibility in her heart. While Amara was finding her footing, Damien's world was unraveling. The once dominant businessman found himself haunted by the absence of his wife. The mansion felt cold and empty without her presence, her laughter, and her quiet strength. The private investigator Damien had hired brought back fragments of Amara's new life: a modest apartment, a job at the library, and a painting displayed in a cafe. Damien stared at a photograph of the painting, the stormy seascape evoking a pang of regret. He realized how deeply he had underestimated her. Driven by guilt, Damien began reevaluating his choices. Memories of their early days together flooded his mind. How her eyes would light up when she talked about art, how she would stay up late painting despite her exhaustion, and how he had slowly pushed her passion aside, dismissing it as unimportant. He resolved to find her, not to bring her back, but to apologize. For the first time, Damien was willing to put her happiness above his pride. Back in the town, Amara decided to take a leap of faith and agree to the exhibition. Carlo's unwavering support had given her the courage to share her work with others. As she prepared her pieces for display, she found herself pouring her heart into each brushstroke. Carlo became a constant presence during this time, offering help and encouragement. "This painting," he said one evening, pointing to a vibrant piece of a sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "It feels hopeful, like you're telling the world you're ready to start over." Amara looked at the painting, her eyes misting. "Maybe I am," she whispered. The day of the exhibition arrived, and the small gallery buzzed with excitement. Amara stood nervously by her paintings, her heart pounding as visitors admired her work. Carlo stayed by her side, offering quiet reassurance. As the evening progressed, a familiar face entered the gallery, Damien. Amara froze, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't seen him in months, and the sight of him stirred a storm of emotions: anger, fear, and a flicker of the love she thought she had buried. Damien's eyes scanned the room until they found her. He approached cautiously, his usually confident demeanor replaced with hesitation. "Amara," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight of regret. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I came to apologize," Damien said, his gaze earnest. "I was blind to what you needed, to who you are. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you until you left." Amara crossed her arms, trying to shield herself from the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "You didn't care then. Why should I believe you care now?" Damien looked around the gallery, his eyes lingering on her paintings. "Because I see you now, Amara. Your art, it's a reflection of everything I failed to understand about you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry." Carlo, standing nearby, watched the exchange with a mix of concern and understanding. He didn't interfere, knowing this was a moment Amara needed to face. Amara took a deep breath, the anger and hurt bubbling inside her. "You can't undo the years of neglect with an apology, Damien. I've built a new life here, a life where I'm finally finding myself." "I don't want to disrupt that," Damien said, his voice breaking. "I just needed to tell you how much I regret everything." As he turned to leave, Amara felt a pang of sadness. Despite everything, a part of her had once loved him deeply, but she also knew that love couldn't erase the scars he had left. That night, as she stood before her paintings, Amara felt a sense of closure. Damien's apology, though unexpected, was a reminder of how far she had come. She wasn't the woman who had walked out of that mansion months ago. She was stronger, braver, and ready to embrace the future. Carlo found her later, offering her a warm smile. "You okay?" he asked gently. Amara nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "I think I finally am." The exhibition became a turning point in Amara's journey, solidifying her resolve to move forward. While Damien returned to the city, carrying the weight of his regrets, Amara began to see Carlo not just as a friend, but as someone who had quietly become her anchor. The aftermath of Damien's appearance at the gallery lingered with Amara, but not as she had expected. Instead of plunging her into despair, his apology felt like the closing of a chapter she had long struggled to finish. It was a reminder that she had reclaimed control over her life, and now, her future was hers to write. Her paintings, a vivid collection of emotions and experiences, were the centerpiece of the gallery exhibition's success. The owner marveled at the number of inquiries about purchasing her work. Amara's confidence soared with every compliment she received from visitors who resonated with her art. One evening, as she packed her supplies after a day of painting at the cafe, Carlo approached with an invitation. "There's a small art retreat happening this weekend in the hills. It's meant for artists to recharge and find inspiration. You should come." Amara hesitated. "I don't know. It sounds wonderful, but I'm not sure I'm ready for something like that." Carlo grinned. It's not about being ready. It's about taking a chance. Besides, you've earned a break. Let someone else take care of you for a change." His words resonated, and Amara decided to go. The retreat turned out to be a magical experience. Amid the scenic landscapes and serene atmosphere, she rediscovered the unbridled joy of creating for herself. She met other artists who inspired her with their stories of resilience and growth, and for the first time, she felt a sense of belonging. Carlo's presence added an unexpected layer of comfort. He didn't just encourage her, he celebrated her triumphs, no matter how small. Watching him sketch landscapes with effortless skill, Amara felt a growing appreciation for his patience and support. "Your paintings have so much soul," Carlo told her one evening as they watched the sunset. "It's like they're speaking your truth." Amara glanced at him, her cheeks warming. "Maybe it's because I've finally stopped hiding." Back in town, Amara continued to immerse herself in her art. Her newfound confidence extended beyond her paintings, affecting her relationships and her daily life. She started volunteering at a local community center, teaching art classes to children. Seeing their faces light up as they experimented with colors reminded her of her own journey and how far she had come. One afternoon, while preparing for a class, she received an unexpected visit. Standing in the doorway was Evelyn, Damien's mother. Amara's heart sank at the sight of her former mother-in-law, the woman who had once championed Damien's every decision, even at Amara's expense. Evelyn's usually imperious demeanor was replaced with visible remorse. "I hope I'm not intruding," Evelyn said softly. Amara hesitated before gesturing for her to sit. "What brings you here?" Evelyn sighed, her gaze dropping. "I owe you an apology, Amara. I was wrong to stand by and let Damien treat you the way he did. I was wrong to dismiss your feelings. I thought I was protecting him, but in doing so, I hurt you." Amara blinked, taken aback by the unexpected admission. "Why now?" "Because losing you changed him," Evelyn replied, her voice trembling. "He's not the same man. He regrets everything, and it's made me reflect on my own mistakes. You deserved better from both of us." While Amara didn't know how to respond, she felt a strange sense of release. Evelyn's apology wasn't a balm for the past, but it was another reminder of how much stronger she had become. As the weeks passed, Amara found herself navigating uncharted territory. Her art classes at the community center grew in popularity, and she received an offer to partner with a nonprofit organization to host more workshops. Carlo remained a steady presence in her life, their friendship deepening with each shared moment. Yet, beneath the surface, there was an undeniable shift in their dynamic. Amara often caught herself thinking about him when he wasn't around, her heart fluttering at his small gestures of care and kindness. One evening, Carlo surprised her by taking her to a nearby vineyard. The sprawling landscape, bathed in the warm hues of twilight, took her breath away. "You've been working so hard lately," Carlo said as they strolled through the vineyard. "You deserve a night to relax and celebrate everything you've achieved." Amara smiled, the weight of her accomplishments finally settling in. "I wouldn't have come this far without your support," she admitted. Carlo stopped and turned to her, his expression earnest. "You've done all the hard work, Amara. I've just been lucky enough to watch you shine." His words lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken feelings. For the first time, Amara allowed herself to imagine what it might mean to let someone into her life again, not as a crutch, but as an equal partner. As they sipped wine under the starlit sky, Amara felt a sense of hope she hadn't known in years. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she was no longer afraid to take the first step. Amara's days were becoming busier, her art gaining traction in unexpected ways. Between her community classes, nonprofit collaborations, and gallery requests, she barely had time to think. Yet, her mind often wandered to Carlo, the man who had quietly but steadily become her anchor. One breezy afternoon, Carlo visited her class at the community center unannounced. He arrived with coffee in hand and a smile that lit up the entire room. "I thought you might need a caffeine boost," he said, holding out a cup. Amara chuckled, taking the cup gratefully. You're becoming dangerously good at knowing exactly what I need. Just looking out for you, Carlo said lightly, though his eyes lingered on her with a warmth that made her heart skip a beat. As the children worked on their paintings, Carlo stayed, helping them clean brushes and chatting with the young artists. His natural charm and easy manner endeared him to everyone in the room, including Amara. Watching him interact with the children, she couldn't help but wonder if she was allowing herself to see something more in him, a possibility she hadn't dared to entertain in years. That evening, as they walked out of the center together, Carlo turned to her. There's something I've been meaning to ask, he began, his voice unusually tentative. Amara's curiosity piqued. What is it? There's an art showcase next weekend in the city. It's a big event, and I think your work deserves to be seen there. I was wondering if you'd like to go with me. The invitation caught her off guard. Her first instinct was to decline, to retreat into the safety of her routine. But as she looked into Carlo's hopeful eyes, she realized she didn't want to say no. I'll think about it, she said, smiling. As the art showcase approached, Amara found herself battling nerves. Her work had been on display before, but this event felt different. It wasn't just about her art. It was about stepping into a world she had long avoided, a world where she would be seen in more ways than one. On the morning of the showcase, she stood before her mirror, adjusting her simple yet elegant dress. The woman staring back at her was a far cry from the Amara of a year ago. She looked confident, self-assured, and ready to face whatever lay ahead. When Carlo arrived to pick her up, his breath caught at the sight of her. You look stunning, he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Thank you, Amara replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. The showcase was held in a grand hall, bustling with artists, critics, and art enthusiasts. As they walked in, Carlo stayed by her side, offering quiet reassurance with his presence. Amara's paintings, displayed prominently, attracted a steady stream of admirers. She answered their questions with a confidence she didn't know she had, her passion for her work shining through. Midway through the evening, Amara spotted a familiar face across the room, Damien. Her heart clenched involuntarily. He hadn't seen her yet, but his presence was like a shadow creeping into her light. Carlo noticed her change in demeanor. Is everything okay? He asked gently. She hesitated before nodding. Just someone I wasn't expecting to see. When Damien eventually approached, Amara held her ground. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Amara, he said, his voice soft. I didn't know you'd be here. I'm not sure why you're surprised, she replied evenly. This is my world now. Damien glanced at her paintings, his gaze lingering on one in particular, a piece that depicted a fractured heart slowly being mended. Your work is incredible, he said. I never appreciated it enough before. That's true, Amara said, her tone steady, but I don't need your appreciation anymore. Carlo stepped in then, his presence a quiet but firm reminder of the new life she had built. Is everything okay here? He asked, addressing Amara. Yes, she said, her voice unwavering. Everything is just fine. As Damien walked away, Amara felt a sense of closure wash over her. The chapter of her life that had revolved around him was truly over, and she was finally free to write a new one. After the showcase, Carlo suggested a late-night walk along the riverfront to wind down. The city lights reflected on the water, casting a magical glow over the scene. Thank you for being there tonight, Amara said as they strolled. I don't think I could have done it without you. You didn't need me, Carlo said with a smile, but I'm glad I could be there anyway. They walked in comfortable silence for a while before Carlo spoke again. You know, Amara, you've changed so much since the day we met. Watching you find your strength has been inspiring. Amara looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude and something deeper. You've been a big part of that, Carlo, more than you realize. He stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. Amara, there's something I need to tell you. Before he could finish, A sudden downpour interrupted them, drenching them both in seconds. They burst into laughter, the moment's tension giving way to lightheartedness. As they sought shelter under a nearby awning, Carlo took her hand, his touch warm despite the rain. "I was going to say, I care about you, Amara. A lot." Amara's breath hitched. The vulnerability in his eyes mirrored her own feelings. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of love again. "I care about you too," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the rain. As they stood there, wet and laughing, the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them and the promise of what could be. Amara woke to the soft glow of sunlight streaming through her window, a lingering warmth in her heart from the previous night's unexpected turn. Carlo's confession played on a loop in her mind, and though it left her both excited and nervous, it was a moment she knew she would cherish forever. Later that day, she sat in her small studio, trying to pour her swirling emotions into her art. Each brushstroke seemed to carry the weight of her journey, her pain, her healing, and now, the unfamiliar yet welcome stirrings of love. Carlo, ever supportive, didn't push for answers or declarations. Instead, he gave her the space to process. That evening, he texted her, "Hope your day was as colorful as your paintings. Dinner this weekend? My treat." Amara smiled as she replied, "Only if you let me pick the place." The weekend came quickly, and Amara chose a cozy, family-run Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. When Carlo arrived, dressed casually but with an undeniable charm, Amara felt a flutter in her chest. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, their conversation flowed effortlessly. Carlo shared stories about his travels, his dreams, and even his insecurities, making Amara feel like she was seeing a side of him few others did. As the evening drew on, Carlo grew serious. "Amara, I need you to know something. I don't just admire you as an artist or a friend. What I feel for you is deeper than that. But I'll wait for you to be ready. I'll wait as long as it takes." His words hung in the air, vulnerable and sincere. Amara reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "I don't know where this will lead, Carlo, but I want to find out with you." Carlo's smile lit up the room, and in that moment, Amara knew she had taken the first step towards something beautiful. Amara's days were busier than ever. Her art was gaining recognition, with galleries reaching out for exhibitions and nonprofits requesting collaborations. Yet, amidst the chaos, her moments with Carlo remained a grounding force. One morning, as she sorted through invitations to various events, she came across a letter from a prestigious gallery in New York. They wanted to feature her work in a solo exhibition, a dream come true. But the thought of leaving the life she had rebuilt, even temporarily, filled her with uncertainty. Carlo noticed her unease during their lunch date that afternoon. "What's on your mind?" he asked. Amara hesitated before handing him the letter. "This could be huge for my career, but it's in New York. I don't know if I'm ready to leave everything behind." Carlo read the letter, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at her and said, "This is your dream, Amara. You owe it to yourself to chase it, and I'll support you, no matter what." His words touched her deeply, but they also raised questions she wasn't ready to face. What would happen to them if she left? Could their budding relationship survive the distance? As Amara prepared for her upcoming exhibition, she threw herself into her work, trying to quiet the doubts and fears gnawing at her. Carlo, true to his word, remained her biggest supporter, helping her pack and offering words of encouragement. The night before her departure, he invited her to his apartment for dinner. The space was warm and inviting, filled with personal touches that made her feel at home. Over a candlelit meal, they talked about everything and nothing. Her plans in New York, his ambitions, and the moments that had brought them to this point. When the conversation lulled, Carlo took her hand. "Amara, I want you to know that no matter where you go, I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere." Tears welled in Amara's eyes. "You've been my rock, Carlo. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for me." "You don't have to thank me," he said softly. "Just promise me one thing. Don't let fear hold you back." You're stronger than you realize." As the night came to an end, Amara felt a mix of emotions: gratitude for Carlo, excitement for the opportunities ahead, and a bittersweet ache at the thought of leaving. Standing at his door, she hesitated before turning to him. "I'll miss you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll miss you too," Carlo replied, "but I'll be here when you're ready to come home." With that, he leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, a promise, unspoken yet understood. The day of Amara's departure arrived. Carlo stood with her at the train station, his usual calm demeanor masking the storm of emotions within him. He had encouraged her every step of the way, but now, as the train approached, the reality of her leaving felt heavier than he had anticipated. Amara clutched her suitcase and gave him a nervous smile. "You've been my anchor, Carlo. I'll miss you more than words can say." Carlo took her hands in his grip firm yet gentle. "And I'll be counting the days until you're back. Don't ever forget, you're not alone, no matter how far you go." Their goodbye was a poignant mix of hope and heartbreak. As the train pulled away, Carlo stood on the platform, watching until Amara disappeared from view. Amara's arrival in New York was both exhilarating and overwhelming. The city's energy was infectious, and the gallery staff welcomed her warmly. Her art studio, set up within the gallery, became her sanctuary. Still, in the quiet moments, she felt the ache of Carlo's absence. His daily texts and calls were her lifeline, a reminder of the connection that had grown so vital to her. Meanwhile, Carlo threw himself into his work, using his busy schedule to distract himself. Yet, every time his phone chimed with a message from Amara, his heart lifted. The day of Amara's solo exhibition arrived, a culmination of years of hard work and resilience. The gallery was packed with art enthusiasts, critics, and collectors. Her paintings, each a reflection of her journey, drew admiration and praise from all corners. Amara moved through the crowd, graciously accepting compliments. But amidst the sea of faces, she longed for one in particular, Carlo. As the evening wore on, a familiar voice called her name. She turned, and there he was, standing at the entrance. Carlo had flown in without telling her, a wide smile on his face. "Surprise," he said, his eyes sparkling. Amara's breath caught as she rushed to him, throwing her arms around his neck. "I can't believe you're here," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," Carlo replied. "This is your moment, Amara, and I'm so proud of you." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. With Carlo by her side, Amara felt invincible. She introduced him to the gallery owners as the person who inspired me to keep going, earning Carlo teasing congratulations from her colleagues. Carlo's visit was brief, but it reignited the bond between them, reminding them both of what they were fighting for. When he left, they promised to stay strong and to focus on the bright future they envisioned together. But maintaining a long-distance relationship was not without its challenges. Amara's growing fame meant an increasingly demanding schedule, while Carlo juggled his own responsibilities. Misunderstandings arose, fueled by missed calls and delayed responses. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Amara snapped during a phone call. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, Carlo. I'm exhausted, and it feels like we're drifting apart." Carlo's voice was steady but tinged with pain. "I feel it too, Amara, but we've come too far to give up now. Tell me what you need, and we'll figure it out together." His words softened her anger, and they spent the next hour talking, airing their fears and frustrations. By the end of the call, they felt a renewed sense of commitment. Meanwhile, Carlo began planning a surprise for Amara. Knowing how much her art meant to her, he commissioned a mural in their hometown, featuring elements from her most cherished paintings. When he unveiled it during one of her brief visits back home, Amara was speechless. The mural, painted on the side of a community center, was a testament to her journey and the love Carlo had for her. "I wanted to remind you," Carlo said, "that no matter where you go, this will always be here, and so will I." Tears streamed down Amara's face as she embraced him. "You always know exactly what to say," she murmured. Their love, though tested by distance and time, continued to grow stronger. Amara realized that no matter where life took her, Carlo was her home. Months had passed since Amara's exhibition, and her career was soaring. Invitations to showcase her work in international galleries began pouring in. While she was ecstatic about her success, she couldn't help but feel the strain on her relationship with Carlo. Carlo, on the other hand, was proud but also quietly worried. The distance and Amara's rising fame made him question his place in her life. He often found himself wondering, is she outgrowing us? One evening, during one of their rare phone conversations, Amara noticed the hesitation in Carlo's voice. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. Carlo hesitated before replying, I feel like I'm watching you from a distance, like I'm not really part of your world anymore." Amara's heart sank. She had been so caught up in her work that she hadn't realized how her absence was affecting Carlo. "That's not true," she said, her voice breaking. "You're the reason I'm here, Carlo. Everything I've achieved, it's because you believed in me." But the conversation left both of them unsettled. They knew they needed to address the growing gap between them before it became insurmountable. One day, while Amara was preparing for an upcoming gallery event, she received an unexpected visitor, Margot, the gallery's co-owner. "Amara, I ran into someone who knows you quite well," Margot said with a sly smile. Before Amara could respond, Carlo stepped into the room, holding a bouquet of her favorite lilies. "Carlo," she exclaimed, rushing to hug him, "what are you doing here?" "I figured it was time I stopped letting a phone screen be the only way I saw you," Carlo said, his tone light but his eyes serious. Margot, sensing the need for privacy, excused herself, leaving the couple alone. "I've missed you so much," Amara admitted, her voice trembling, "but I've been so afraid of failing you." Carlo looked at her with a mixture of love and exasperation. "Failing me? Amara, you're accomplishing everything you've ever dreamed of. That's not failure, that's brilliance. But we need to figure out how to do this together. I don't want to lose what we have." Their heartfelt conversation turned into an evening stroll through the city, where they reminisced about their journey and planned how they could better support each other. By the end of the night, Amara felt a renewed sense of purpose, not just for her career, but for her relationship with Carlo. Carlo's visit rekindled their bond, but it also highlighted the challenges they still faced. Determined to make things work, they both made compromises. Amara began carving out time in her hectic schedule to visit Carlo, while Carlo started exploring ways to bring his career closer to her. One of his business clients offered him an opportunity to open a branch in New York, which Carlo seriously considered. During one of Amara's visits back home, Carlo surprised her with a proposal, not a marriage proposal, but a promise. "I've been offered a chance to work in New York," he said, holding her hands. "It's not permanent, but it's a step closer to you. What do you think?" Amara's eyes filled with tears. "I think it's perfect," she whispered. With Carlo's impending move and Amara's commitment to balancing her career and their relationship, they began to feel hopeful about their future. Amara and Carlo were making strides in their relationship despite the obstacles. Carlo's impending move to New York was a beacon of hope for their future, but life had a way of throwing unexpected hurdles. Amara's career hit a critical point when she was offered a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to exhibit her art in Paris, a dream she had cherished since childhood. The catch? She would have to spend 6 months in Europe, managing the exhibit and working with some of the most renowned artists in the world. When Amara shared the news with Carlo during a celebratory dinner, his initial reaction was pride. "Paris, Amara, that's incredible. You've worked so hard for this," he said, smiling, though his eyes betrayed a hint of worry. "But 6 months is a long time," he added hesitantly. Amara reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "It is, but we've managed so much already. This is just another challenge we can overcome, right?" Carlo nodded, but deep down, he felt the strain of the distance looming again. He couldn't shake the fear that their lives were pulling them in opposite directions. As Amara prepared for her departure to Paris, Carlo threw himself into finalizing his plans to move to New York. He wanted to surprise her by arranging for his move to coincide with her return from Europe. Meanwhile, Amara found herself grappling with doubts of her own. The pressure of living up to the expectations of the Paris art scene was immense, and she couldn't help but feel guilty about leaving Carlo behind once again. Their communication became sporadic as they both got busier, and small misunderstandings began to creep in. One evening, during a phone call, their frustrations boiled over. "You've barely called this week, Amara," Carlo said, his tone sharp. "It feels like I'm not even a priority anymore." "That's not fair, Carlo," Amara shot back. "Do you think this is easy for me? I'm juggling so much right now, and all I need is your support." The argument ended with both of them hanging up, leaving an ache in their hearts. The silence between them stretched for days, and both began to question whether their relationship could survive the constant strain. As Amara settled into her life in Paris, she was swept away by the vibrancy of the city and the whirlwind of events surrounding her exhibit. But no matter how much she tried to focus on her work, Carlo's absence weighed heavily on her. One day, after a particularly exhausting event, Amara found herself wandering through the streets of Montmartre, her mind filled with memories of Carlo. She sat down at a small cafe, pulled out her sketchpad, and began drawing, a habit she hadn't indulged in for weeks. Her drawing soon transformed into a sketch of Carlo's face, his eyes filled with the quiet strength that had always been her anchor. Realizing how much she missed him, Amara decided it was time to bridge the gap between them. That night, she called Carlo, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm sorry," she began, "for everything. For making you feel like you're not important. You are, Carlo, more than anything else in my life." Carlo, who had been equally tormented by their fight, softened. "I've missed you, Amara, but we need to figure out how to make this work for real this time." Unbeknownst to Amara, Carlo had been planning a surprise visit to Paris. 2 weeks later, as Amara unveiled her exhibit at the prestigious gallery, Carlo walked in, catching her completely off guard. Amara's eyes filled with tears as she rushed to embrace him. "You're here," she exclaimed. "I couldn't stay away," Carlo said with a grin. "I needed to see you, to remind us both of why we're doing this." Their reunion was a turning point, reigniting their love and determination to overcome any challenge together. As they strolled through the streets of Paris hand in hand, Amara and Carlo felt a renewed sense of hope for their future. The months following Amara and Carlo's reunion were a period of personal growth and rediscovery. They had worked hard to repair the emotional rift that had formed during their time apart, and though the road ahead was still challenging, they were determined to face it together. Amara's exhibit in Paris had been a success, and her reputation as an artist was beginning to reach new heights. Carlo, too, had made remarkable progress in New York, establishing connections that would set the stage for his next big career move. Despite the distance that still separated their lives, their love had strengthened. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Carlo surprised Amara with a call. "I have something for you," he said, a hint of mischief in his voice. "Something? What is it?" Amara asked, intrigued. "Pack your bags," he replied. "You're coming to New York. I've arranged everything for you." Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? I'm supposed to be here for another 2 months." Carlo chuckled. "Consider it a little escape. We both deserve it. I'll book your flight, and I want you here as soon as possible. It's time we take the next step together, Amara." Tears welled in her eyes, a mix of happiness and surprise. "Carlo, I don't even know what to say. I've been so focused on work, and now this. You're making this so easy for me." "I'm not making it easy," Carlo said softly. "I'm making it real. We've been through so much, but we're still here. We can finally make this work. No more waiting." The decision was made, and soon Amara was packing for a trip to New York, a city that would not only be the start of a new chapter in their relationship, but also a place where she could build her future alongside Carlo. Amara's arrival in New York was everything she had imagined, and yet, she was unsure of what the future would hold. She was stepping into Carlo's world, a world she had only heard about in stories and seen through his phone calls and texts. This city, with its endless energy and constant hustle, felt both exhilarating and intimidating. Carlo welcomed her with open arms, showing her around his city, introducing her to his friends, and giving her a glimpse into the life he had built for himself. Still, Amara felt a sense of unease. She had always been independent, having carved her path in Paris, and now she was faced with the idea of starting over in an entirely new environment. One evening, as they walked along the Brooklyn Bridge, Amara turned to Carlo. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," she confessed. "I love you, but I don't know if I can let go of everything I've worked for to fit into your world." Carlo stopped and took her hands in his. "I'm not asking you to give up anything, Amara. I'm asking you to be a part of this with me, not to erase everything you've done, but to add to it. We're partners, and this journey is ours to navigate together." His words were simple but powerful, and Amara felt her heart swelling with love and gratitude. She realized then that this wasn't about changing who she was or compromising her dreams. It was about supporting each other's goals while building something new, something they both could share. They agreed that Amara would keep working on her art in New York, finding new opportunities to showcase her work, while Carlo continued to pursue his ambitions. Slowly, Amara began to carve out her place in the city, navigating the complexities of her career while balancing her love for Carlo and their shared vision of the future. As Amara settled into life in New York, she found herself gaining more confidence in both her professional and personal life. Her art was now being featured in several prestigious galleries, and she was collaborating with local artists to bring fresh perspectives to the city's art scene. Her relationship with Carlo had deepened, and together, they had overcome the initial hurdles of their new life together. But just as things were beginning to fall into place, Amara faced a life-changing decision. She was offered a major opportunity to showcase her work in an international art fair in London, a chance to further solidify her career. The fair was scheduled for the same month. Carlo was planning to launch a major project in New York, a project that could catapult him to even greater heights. Amara was torn. She didn't want to let Carlo down, but she knew that this opportunity was too big to ignore. It was a turning point for her career, one that she had worked toward for years. One night, after a long discussion about their future, Amara turned to Carlo with tears in her eyes. "I can't do both, Carlo. I want to be there for you, but I can't pass this up. It's everything I've worked for." Carlo pulled her into his arms. "Amara, I know how important this is for you. I've always known. You're not just an artist, you're a force, and you deserve this chance. I'll be here when you get back, and when you return, we'll figure out the next step together." His words filled her with relief and love. She realized that their relationship was built on mutual respect and understanding, not sacrifices. They were both pursuing their dreams while lifting each other up. Amara accepted the offer to go to London, knowing that it was a pivotal moment for her career. Carlo's support was unwavering, and in the weeks that followed, they communicated daily, reminding each other that no matter where their journeys took them, they were building something lasting. Amara's time in London was transformative. She immersed herself in the art community and returned with new ideas, new inspirations, and a fresh sense of purpose. She had conquered her fears and doubts, and when she came back to New York, she and Carlo were ready to embark on the next phase of their shared journey. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more delightful stories.